Are you doing webinars over on Zoom and you want to sync it with your HubSpot portal? In this video, I'm going to show you how to do just that.
Welcome to HubSpot Hacks, where we help you get more out of HubSpot.
HubSpot is a powerful tool for all things marketing, but especially these days, a lot of companies have been using a lot more webinars, given the pandemic, but also just as a chance to reach all of their customers regardless of where they are with valuable content. But Zoom Webinar and HubSpot are not natively synced together. You do have to connect the two systems and then watch as you set up workflows to trigger some of those chains of commands as you use the two systems together. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to sync the two together and then how to set up those workflows and use the two systems so that you have that seamless campaign experience. Let's dive in. So one of the first things you'll need to do in your Zoom portal, so this is actually outside of HubSpot, you'll need to set up your first webinar. So we're going to do all of that here on this video. So first of all, I'm going to schedule this webinar. Keep in mind I'm using dummy information, so any of the information here isn't an actual live webinar. But we're going to have the topic here as get the most out of HubSpot, which is very fitting. We're going to assume that we're going to enter a description here and then choose our dates. So we'll do that here, say the 10th at 12 p.m. Central. And the reason why some of this is important is you'll see this on the next screen as we move into HubSpot. So duration, time zone, we're going to make the registration required, and we're going to require a passcode. We're not actually going to do that. We're going to turn our video on for the hosts and the panelists. We're going to use audio both. All of these types of things are more of kind of your webinar preferences. But if you want to make the webinar available on demand, you would do that here, and it's on demand inside of Zoom. What I'd recommend as a HubSpot user, keep in mind all of this is actually possible on HubSpot Pro or Enterprise. If you have Starter, you're going to have to do a little bit of a workaround. So the tips shared in this video are for Pro or Enterprise. But if you wanted to host it on Zoom, you click this box here. We're going to click automatically record the webinar just because a lot of times I see people forget. And then we're going to go ahead and click schedule. So now that we're on the back side of Zoom, we've got this scheduled here and we've got this webinar ID. So this is what we're going to need when we go over to HubSpot and sync the two systems together. So let's jump back over to HubSpot. So a couple of key things that you'll need in order to set up this webinar campaign inside of HubSpot. This moves you beyond just the syncing. So you're going to need a landing page for people to opt into the webinar or register. You're going to need a form on that landing page to register. You're going to need a thank you page. So once they've registered, they get a confirmation email that sends, hey, we got your registration. And then we'll also need a landing page to host the webinar after the fact, but we're not going to go into that one just specifically in this video. So those four things we're going to need, I've got 3 of them set up already, and I'm going to walk through those here with you as we get this set up. So before I do any of that though, I do want to make sure that my HubSpot is synced with Zoom, and we're going to do that over in the integrations area. So go here to your little gear icon, and we're going to go into integrations and just click on that integrations area and connected apps. All right, so we've got a lot of integrations here in our portal. If you don't have any and you don't show that Zoom's already here, you're going to simply go up here, visit the app marketplace, type in Zoom, and then you can see that this Zoom by HubSpot is what we're looking for. So Zoom Info is also a product in the market, not the same thing as Zoom Webinars or Zoom Meetings. We're going to click on this Zoom here. So you'll see that there's going to be a page about the integration. If you've already got it installed, this little install app over here is going to be gray. If you don't, you can simply click on install app. It'll walk you through the details very, very quickly, and that part is pretty straightforward. However, once you get it set up, let's go back to see what that actually looks like. So we're going to go back one screen here, actually 2, and then we're going to click on the Zoom integration since it is already integrated to our HubSpot portal. Now, when I say integrated, there is a yes, it's connected, but then we have to tell the integration what we want it to do before we actually get the goodness that comes from this specific tool. So basically, we've got the connected user here, which is me. We've got feature permissions, which you'll want to go ahead and go into set. And then we've got settings here, which this means that when I have a Zoom meeting inside of my portal, which we don't go into Zoom meetings in this video, we have a different one about that, but we don't want to create new contacts for anybody that I meet with at SimpleStrat because they're my team members. So I chose to include an exclusion here. And then user accounts are going to be basically whose account is linked to this HubSpot, which it's mine. And for the webinars piece, let's go ahead and we want to say which Zoom user is going to be synced here with the webinars. So actually you see me. And then right now I have it set up to automatically sync. If this is unchecked, it's probably a good idea if you do use webinars for other purposes, let's say client engagements or employee development, whatever you might use that webinar seat for. If it's more than just marketing, you probably want to uncheck this box. If it's not, and it's just purely for marketing, you can check this box, and then any new webinar that you create will be automatically synced here inside of HubSpot. Now, the purpose of this is when we sync these two together, we actually create new contacts in HubSpot when someone registers for a Zoom webinar. So you'll see here that the webinar I just created over in Zoom is now under this webinar name. You can see that webinar ID that I showed you over here, this 878, whatever all the numbers were, is also right here. So if I wasn't quite sure if that synced correctly, I can hit resync all the data. And again, it would sync one more time here. And it tells me the last time it was completed was just now. So when we go back to this webinar information over here, we're going to actually scroll down a little bit yet, and we're going to look at a couple of options inside of the Zoom area. So we've got a couple of things here that are email settings, these branding polls and survey. All of those things are things that you might want to use in your webinar, but we're going to click on email settings because this part is pretty important. So right now, by default, Zoom does not send any emails to remind attendees and panelists to attend. Now, some people choose to do this through HubSpot. We have found in our experience that it's best to use the Zoom system to manage this. Yes, you lose a little bit of flexibility with the branding, but I'm going to tell you, most of us at this age in kind of digitization, especially through the pandemic, we have gotten used to communicating and getting notifications from Zoom about upcoming events. So we definitely want to embrace this as you're looking to make this sync with HubSpot and Zoom just seamless and better for the user. So I suggest that you turn on the confirmation email to registrants, which is here. So this is loaded with some information and some tokens inside of Zoom that you can use. So we've got meeting topic, again, whatever I put in here up at the top as get the most out of HubSpot, that is what will show up here in this meeting topic confirmation. So I can change this if I just wanted to say webinar confirmation : get the most out of HubSpot. You can change that yourself. This here actually is standard. And the nice thing about this too is it goes out with the information specific to their time zone. So you don't have to mess with any of that in HubSpot, which is beautiful. And then if you wanted to add any additional text down here, you certainly could. So I'm not going to change any of that because that actually looks pretty good for me. I'm going to X out of this. And then we do have confirmation email turned on. I'm going to click send me a preview email just to make sure. Okay, you can get that and see what it looks like. We've got reminder emails turned off. Again, in today's day and age, we are all super busy. Even if we have it on our calendar, we probably could do best by just getting a reminder a day before and an hour before. There's also a week before, but I don't typically turn those on because a week out, I might still have people registering. It's just a little bit kind of a hassle to send that out. Again, this comes out automatically, so I'm going to click on save. All right, so I've got those emails going out. So keep in mind, when someone registers for this webinar, they're going to register and get a confirmation email from Zoom, and then a day before and an hour before. So that's all set up on the Zoom side. Now, this is where it gets fun over here in HubSpot. So we've got all the branding and everything from the registration piece under control and under our branding over in the HubSpot portal. So I'm gonna go, now that we've got this synced here on the bottom, I'm gonna go to our marketing area, and first thing we need to do is we need to create a form that's going to allow us to register someone for the webinar. That form is what we're going to put on a landing page as well. So here over in Lead Capture, we're going to go to Forms, and I've got a webinar HubSpot form test set up. So you can see that right now, this is what the form looks like. We've just got a first name, last name, and we've got a video about how to create forms. If you haven't created forms before, go back and watch that video, and that will give you some additional tips. But right now we've got this form, and then you'll need to create a landing page for the registration and a landing page for the thank you after that submission is achieved. So we'll click over to landing pages. And if you don't have a landing page, you can easily create one here. If you haven't created a landing page before, go watch some of the videos we have about that. But you can click on landing page registration test is what I put together before this video. So we've got register for the webinar, basically a little overview. These are kind of best practices. Tell the viewer what they're going to get, give them the key takeaways, and then offer them an opportunity to register. So this form is actually a widget that I drag in from over here. So you'll notice that this, anytime you're building a landing page, you've got kind of these modules you can drag into a page. I drag in a form module, and if I click on it, it's going to ask me what form do I want to use. So I'm going to click on this webinar test form, just like we created just now. And then I'm going to go ahead and make the settings on this page. We've got a page title, we've got a really nice URL, and we've got a meta description for search engines. And then because this happens to be for us, part of a campaign, I'm going to select HubSpot Hacks. If you don't have a campaign set up, you can set up a new campaign and then link your webinar here. The beauty of that is it does allow you to track the information, track the number of registrants related to all of the assets that you have as part of that campaign and help provide a little bit of an ROI. And then we've got a featured image, and then that's pretty much what we need to. We're gonna go ahead and publish this now. All right, so we've got a landing page registration test. Perfect. All right, so we're gonna go back to the landing pages, and like I said, we need a thank you page now. So we've got a thank you page here, and we're going to click on edits. And you'll see that we've went ahead and already edited the content on this thank you page. Go ahead and set the settings like we did before, confirmation, meta. We're gonna add the campaign here, and we're gonna click on publish. Okay, now the reason why that's important is now that it's live, we're gonna go back to that landing page that was the first place where people register, and we're gonna tell the form, basically once someone has submitted that form, I want them to go to that thank you page. So let's click on to edits, and then we will be done with this section. So we're gonna click on this form. We're going to click on this, here we go, redirect to another page, and then I want the thank you page. All right, thank you webinar test, there we go. Okay, and we're going to click on updates. Update page now, perfect. Okay, so we've got the assets that we need to register as a thank you, a form, and then the last thing we're going to need is an email. So here's where the email from HubSpot comes in this particular scenario. So when someone registers for the webinar, they've got this registration page, they're going to get an email from Zoom, but we're also going to send them an email from our organization introducing us, giving them a heads up, and then also putting a face to our company. So we'll go to the marketing email. Again, this has been already created. We created an automated email. So if you are creating this, when you create the email, you're going to need to select this automated one here, which is what we did when we created it. So I'm going to click into this email. You'll notice that we've got our logo at the top. We're using a personalization token, and then we've got the details of the webinar here. Login details being sent from Zoom, so watch for that. And then we've got Will as our point of contact here. So for settings, we've got a registration, again, best practices, confirm that they got the information in correctly, and tell them you're looking forward to seeing them. And here's the details for the webinar. So we're going to review that and save that. Since it's automated, we're not going to select a day that it's actually being sent out. We're going to click Save for Automation and Publish Email, and there we go. So you'll notice that it's published when I go back to the emails, and you can see Published Automated Email. All right, now let's go ahead and bring the two systems together, and you can see how this kind of plays out. So first of all, we're going to go to the workflows, and we're going to make sure that anybody who registers for a Zoom webinar, so if they register through that page, we're going to make sure that they get added to the Zoom registrations over in Zoom. So I'm going to create a workflow, and we're going to name our workflow webinar, and we're going to say get the most. Okay, so we're just doing a test here. And we're actually going to start this from scratch. So that means that I can build the workflow however I want. I'm not using some sort of template. And then I'm using this with a contact-based workflow. If you're not sure the difference between workflows and sequences, we have a video about that. But basically, workflows allow us to tell the system what to send, how to categorize the specific contacts, and what to do with them as all this activity happens in the background. So we're going to click on Next. And then we've got a need to say what's going to start this workflow. And the trigger here is when someone sends a form submission to register for the webinar. So we're going to select the form submissions as the trigger, and we're going to look for the webinar form. Here we go. And right now we don't actually have that form on any other page, so we're just going to keep this as any page. If we use this form across multiple webinars, which if you have multiple webinars, that's probably a best practice to not have separate webinar forms for every single webinar. Instead, have one webinar form that actually is then segmented by the page that it's on. But we're going to say any page for now, and then we're going to say save. All right, so when someone is registered for this webinar by the form, we're going to trigger this workflow. So when that happens, we're going to say, hey, let's go ahead and add this contact over to Zoom, make them a Zoom webinar. All right, so here's where that webinar ID comes in. We're going to go to Zoom here, go back up to this webinar ID, and we're going to copy, and we're going to paste this over here into Let's see here. Yes. Okay. So first name, email, and last name are pulled through into Zoom. So because Zoom doesn't have as robust registration, we can't actually, like if we wanted to capture more things on our side, we certainly could. We could capture job title, we could capture interest, all of that would stay inside of HubSpot. But the only three things that are going to be pushed over into Zoom are these three things right here: first name, last name, and email. So that's actually going to be fine. So we'll click on save. Perfect. So now what has happened is we've registered them in HubSpot and then we've added them to Zoom webinar. So in order for us to be able to send marketing emails, that confirmation we just showed you that's automated, we need to make sure that that contact is a marketing contact. Now, depending on where you're at when you're watching this video, if you have a grandfathered portal or it happens to be a little bit older, you might not have this feature in there. If it's a newer installment or a newer instance of HubSpot in the last, let's say 3 years, you're probably going to run into this thing called marketing contacts. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, watch our video about marketing contacts. But basically, we have to tell the system, yes, I want to market to this person, mark them as a marketing contact in order for them to get the emails. So if you'll notice in ours, we actually don't have that as an option because our system was prior to when that was installed. But if you're a newer HubSpot user in the last 3 years, go ahead and make sure one of your actions in this workflow is setting the contact as a marketing contact, because if you don't, they're likely not going to get that email that we're going to be sending out here shortly. So, all right, we've got that as an action. We're going to delay for a certain amount of time simply because sometimes the things that happen in the background of HubSpot need a little bit of time to take hold before we trigger other stuff. So we're just going to delay for a minute. And then we are going to go ahead and send them that email that we just talked about. So we're going to send an email. Notice that said external communication. So this goes to people outside of the company. And we've got this automated webinar follow-up test and save. All right, so if we look at this workflow, what we're seeing is they fill out the form on the landing page, they get added to Zoom, and then basically from Zoom, we can't see this in the HubSpot portal, but once they get added to Zoom, they will get that email, they'll be on the Zoom list, and then they'll get those additional drips and the registration information. We delay for a minute, and then they get that email from us as a confirmation introducing Will. The other thing we might want to do is if someone registers for a webinar, maybe you want to label them as a specific life cycle stage. So they might be a marketing qualified lead, or perhaps you want to label them as anybody who's registered for a webinar. There's additional ways you can use other properties inside of inside of HubSpot, but for the purposes of this demo, that's about as much as we're going to do. The last thing you may want to do, depending on how your notifications work, I know for some teams we work with, they want to know every single time someone registers for a webinar. So you can create an internal email notification, and that would look like this. I'm going to choose it to send to certain users, and we're going to send it to myself. And we're going to, actually, you know what? Let's just set it to the leadership teams here. And we're going to say new webinar registration. And then just like we use in our emails, we can use personalization tokens. So we can say, you just got a new registrant. And then I can say, this is going to be the contact first name. Perfect. And space. And we're going to send a last name. And so on and so forth. So you could put the company name, again, whatever you asked for on the registration should be what you put here. Otherwise, you're likely going to have a lot of empty fields. So we're going to click on save, and that email will then go to the 2 people that are part of the leadership team, which we set up in user permissions. Again, if you haven't watched the how to add a user to HubSpot, we've got a video about that if you want to check out how to do that. All right, so we've got this all set up, and we're going to make sure we go to the settings. When do we want this to run? The campaign, again, you saw me do this earlier, HubSpot Hacks, click on save. We're gonna run it any time of the day, just because people register for webinars, sometimes not during the workday. We don't have any specific goals here, but that's an option. And you can see the history of this specific workflow. So right now, if you had tested your webinar landing page multiple times, like I guarantee you if this was a real webinar, I would have tested this thing like 4 or 5 times already. This will show you existing contacts. But right now, none of our contacts in the system show as meeting this criteria. And then people can't be enrolled in this workflow multiple times, which means if they register for the webinar again, they're not going to go through this whole rigmarole, which is fine. And then we're going to go ahead and make sure that the rest of this is okay. Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. We're going to select no and then turn on. Okay, so that basically gets us where we need to go here. And I'm gonna do one quick thing to show you how this works. So let's go to the landing page and we're going to open this up and we're just gonna test it and show you how this transacts. All right, so register now. I'm gonna say, here's my name. We're going to register here, whoops, and sign me up. Okay, there we go. So we've got the confirmation pages here. And if we happen to go back to HubSpot and we're looking for my name, perfect. Okay, it's gonna take a little bit of time here. It's zapping it over into Zoom. And so we need to make sure we give it a little bit of time. All right, so now if we look at this record that I just used, this was me, again, as a third party registering for my webinar. And I've got on this activity here shows me all the different things that I can have tracked inside of my contact screen. And I've got that she submitted this form. She was added to, this is a workflow that we have just by someone who does submit a form. And then I've got that I was enrolled in this webinar. And you can see that this little Zoom icon shows me that I am now registered in Zoom. If I go back to the Zoom screen, you will see that we were up here at the top, and if you scroll down, you'll see that we have one registrant, and you can actually verify who that registrant was if you wanted to click import, or excuse me, if you wanted to click on edits, and you can see that it was me here. So all of that checks out. So you can see that on this screen, if I refreshed it here, that I've got a registration confirmed. So this marketing email was sent, so I can actually click into this and see what email was sent. So perfect, we've got this here. Hi there, thanks for registering, just like we set up. And then we've got, in terms of the activity, I completed, or this contact completed this workflow. So again, that's all there is to it. That's the entire workflow you might need to integrate Zoom and HubSpot and set up your entire workflow with doing your upcoming webinar. For more tips, tricks, and how-tos, hit that subscribe button. I will tease your interest a little bit. There is one more way that you can promote that webinar beyond Zoom webinars by using LinkedIn lead events and syncing that with Zoom and Zapier to have even further reach. So watch for that video coming out soon. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week.